Hello and welcome back. So now we're going to go ahead and start creating our project. The first thing we're going to do, of course, we're going to make sure that we have our user interface looking exactly as we want it to look like. In this case, we want it to look like this. All right, so let's get to it. Okay, the first thing we do, of course, we go File, New Project, and I'm going to call this the Weather App. Say Next. Notice also here I've changed our API level to be 10, which is 2.3.3 Gingerbread. And if you read here, it says lower API levels target more devices, but have fewer features available. And also it gives you the percentage of devices on the Google Play Store that use this API level. So generally speaking, it's a good idea to have a lower API as the minimum SDK, because then you're covering more devices, right? But also you may have fewer features available if you cover lower devices. It always depends on what kind of applications you are building. In our case here, it's not a very complicated application and we don't need the newest features, right? So it's safe to go lower to 2.3.3. Excellent. Let's go next. Okay, let's make it blank. It's fine. Main activity, that's all good. And now Android Studio is putting together our project. All right, here we are. So let's go ahead and start putting together our user interface. Okay, let's go ahead and get rid of our text here because we have better plans, of course. But before that, let's go ahead and give it a background. So say background, and I already have the colors, of course. So I'm going to say FF1B A1EE. Oh, look at that. It's perfect. Let's go ahead now and create our first text view. So it's going to be text view, wrap content. Let's give an ID. I'm going to call this city text, because that's where our city is going to be here at the top. Of course, let's go ahead and give it text color. I'm going to make it white. Let's give it a text right away. That way we can see. Let's say here Spokane, US, something like that, so we can see. Oh, there it is. Perfect. All right. Let's make it center to be true there. Okay. Well, let's start by putting a text size. Let's make it perhaps 18 SP. All right. Let's make it bold. Text style. Say bold. Perfect. All right. Now we're done with that one. Let's go ahead and put our placeholder for the icon here. Okay, so say image view. Let's give it a fix 100 dp. Let's go ahead and give an ID. Oops, let's go inside here. Give an ID. Our ID is going to be thumbnail icon. That's good. Let's put it below our text title there. Let's say below city text. Okay, let's say then let's give it a margin top of about 10 dp. Let's go ahead and give it a background right now so that we can see where things are located. Okay, there it is. So now we can see it's about there. Perfect. Obviously this will get rid of it once we are dynamically pulling the image from the web. Okay, excellent. Now let's go ahead and put our temperature text view here. So text view, wrap content. Let's give it an ID. I'm going to call this temp text. Let's give it a text so we can see here. Let's put 12. Okay, DG, so we can see it's at the top over there. Let's go ahead and say text style. We want to be normal. All right, so let's go ahead and also say text color. I'm gonna make it white. Let's go ahead and put it below. We want to put it below our city text. All right. That's good, but we want to make sure that it's center. There it is. Excellent. Let's give it a margin top there. Say margin top about 25 dp. All right. Now let's make it a little bit bigger, because again, the temperature is the most important thing. That's what people first see, and that's what people are most interested in seeing anyway. So let's say then text size. Let's give it a big, since 42 SP. Oh, there it is. That's good. That's good. Perfect. Let's move on. All right. Next one's gonna be text again. Wrap content. Let's give an ID. Today it's gonna be rain text. Text color, of course, the same, FF. Let's give text size to be 16 SP. Let's give it text so we can see. Actually, let's go, instead of rain, let's actually call this wind text, okay? And now we're gonna say here wind, so we can see where things are located. It's right up there, no problem. Let's say below. We want it to be below our thumbnail icon. Perfect. Let's give a margin top of 35 dp. Good spacing there, that's great. All right, that's good. Let's do the same also. So text view, wrap content. Let's go ahead and say ID for this one is gonna be cloud text. Okay, let's say text, say cloud. Let's put below. We're going to be below our previous, so in this case, it's going to be below our wind text. Say margin top of about 5 dp. That's fine. Let's give it color, so text color. It's going to be FF, so it's going to be white. All right, that's good. Let's give a text size. So text size, we're going to say the same, about 16 SP. Okay, looking really good. Let's go ahead and do the same. Let's go text view, wrap content, give ID. The ID is now gonna be pressure text. That's where our pressure is gonna be displayed. Let's give a text size of 16 SP. Let's give a margin top of 5 dp. With text color white, so FF there. Let's give a text that says pressure. Okay, so we can see. Okay, let's put it below our previous text view, so which is a cloud text. There it is. Oh, perfect, looking good. That's very good. Okay, let's move on. And now we're gonna go ahead and get another one. So text, so wrap content. ID, it's gonna be humid. This is where our humidity will be. So humid text. Let's say text size 16 SP. Let's say margin top about 5 dp. Text color white. Let's give a text humidity. Okay. And let's put it below, so below, want it below the pressure text. All right, that's great, excellent. Now let's go ahead and say text view again. Yes, a lot of text views. All right, content, you probably are getting very tired now, but it's okay. So ID, in this case, it's gonna be our rise text. Okay, so we can say text size, we can say 16 SP, say layout margin, say margin top, 5 dp, text color white. Let's give a text of, it's a sunrise. Okay, I'd put below the previous one. Okay, so humid text. That's perfect. There it is, sunrise. Let's do the same. So text view, wrap content. Same thing, ID. Set text. Gonna give text size to be 16 SP. Margin top gonna be 5 dp. Text color, we're gonna say white. Text, we're gonna say, for text, we're gonna just say sunset. Want to make sure it's below our previous one, which was rise text. There it is, perfect. All right, so our last one we're gonna put is the update text, which is gonna be at the bottom here. All right, so let's go ahead and say text view again, wrap content. Make sure it's actually wrap content. Oops. All right, let's give it an ID. ID, in this case, is going to be update text. Let's say last updated. Let's say margin top is going to be 5 dp. Let's say center horizontal to be true because we want to be center. Text color white. Text size, I'm gonna say 16 SP. So it's right there. We want to make it below, say below. Now the other thing we need to do, we want to make sure in our action bar we have that change city button here. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna go to our menu, main, Command Alt L to format everything. And here, instead of never, say always. And let's change the ID here to say change city ID. For title, we're gonna just say change city. Of course, we need to create this in our strings here. So let's go ahead, enable string, and go ahead and say like this, change city, and we're gonna call this change city. Save that, go back to main menu, there's no errors, perfect. So let's go ahead and run this so we can see how our things looking. This is how the application should look so far. So let's run this. All right, it should be running now. Oh, and there it is, the weather app, and beautiful. There we have it. All right. And let's see if here, if we click, nothing should happen. Change city. That is amazing. All right. So we are now ready to proceed and start doing the Java part of things. And we will do that in the next video. I'll see you next. Hello everyone and welcome back. So now we're gonna go ahead and start setting things up so that we can start doing the Java coding. The first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna go open up our Android manifest, and since I know that this application will need internet connection, I will go ahead and insert here the internet permission. So you say uses permission, and you can say start typing internet. So there it is, and let's close that. And I like to do this before I start coding because it's easy to forget, and then you start testing things and things don't work or break, and it's always a little bit confusing, okay? All right, so we have that done. Let's get rid of that so we have things a little bit cleaner here. Let's get rid of all of these also. All right, the second thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and create a few packages here, right? Because we want to be able to organize our code. So I go to Java here, right click, say new package, and make sure it's here under main, say okay. The first one I'm gonna call util for utilities, say okay. And you can see there it is. Let's do the same, new package, and make sure again you under main. And then I'm gonna call this data. Okay, do the same thing again. Right click new, package name. I'm going to call model. That's where our classes are going to go. Excellent. That's wonderful. Now we have everything. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead in my util, right click, say new, Java class. I'm going to call this utils. In util class, that's where we're going to put all of our static variables that we're going to be referenced in our code. Again, this is just a way for us to organize our code as opposed to have things all over the place and sometimes not knowing where they are located. All right, so in our utils, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and say public static final type of string. I'm going to say then base URL. Now this base URL here, I'm going to go in. So this is the API URL where all the data that we're trying to fetch, we're trying to get lives, right? And as you can see here, it's got a question mark and the Q, which stands for question, equal, and then we can put a parameter here after the Q that says, for instance, the city, Spokane, and then US, which then will go ahead and get all that information that we need from that particular city. Okay, and the next one, I'm going to go ahead and copy this so I don't have to type and paste here. I'm going to change name. It's going to be icon URL. The icon URL is going to be different, so I'm going to go get it. So this icon URL, it's where we are going to be able to go and get the icon for the weather. So all of that I'm actually getting from here. If you go back to the Open Weather Map API, if you went ahead and read, there's a lot of information here. And again, I suggest you go ahead and read more. If you go to API and you can see here, click more, and you can see here that it is by city, and there it is. So that's where I'm getting it from, except I'm not putting the London, UK, because this information will be dynamic, meaning we are going to be inputting the city and the code of the country. Okay, so this is where I'm getting all of this from, and of course, perfect. And the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a few methods that we're going to be using at a later time. Don't worry too much about it for now. So public static, I'm going to make it static, so I just want to be able to reference it directly as opposed to having to create the object. Okay, so public static, it's going to be JSON object type, because that's what we want returned. I'm going to call this get object, and we're going to pass in a string tag name. I'm going to pass in a JSON object. We're going to call JSON object, and we want to make sure it throws an exception, so it's going to be a JSON exception there. Okay, it's important because when we are sending requests to the internet, things may go wrong very quickly, right? You can send a request and then there's an error or there's some timeout or something. We want to be able to throw exception and make sure that so your app has a way of crashing gracefully. Okay, all right, so here we're gonna say JSON object. We're gonna say JOBJ is equal to JSON object, the one we are passing here, dot get JSON, and we pass in the tag name. Again, this will make much more sense later. And of course, we have to return a JSON object, so JOBG, there it is. All right, it's gonna go the same thing, say public static string, static string, get string. This will say string there, string tag name, JSON object, I'm gonna call JSON object, throws a JSON exception, and here we're gonna just return a JSON object dot get string, and we pass our tag name. All right, say again public static float get float, again string tag name, JSON object. All right, again throws JSON exception. It's perfect. And now we're going to return. Let's cast this thing because it's going to be a float. It's going to be JSON.getDouble. And we pass in a tag name. Getting there. All right, so say public static double get double, and again I'm gonna pass in a tag name, JSON object, gonna be a JSON object, throws JSON exception, and we want to make sure that this returns. I'm gonna cast this float, JSON object dot get double, and we pass in the tag name again. All right, and our last one, let's say public static int get int, again string tag name. Let's be consistent here, and say JSON object throws JSON exception. Let's say return. What are we going to return? JSON object dot get int, and we're going to pass in tag name. Excellent. All right, he survived. If this makes no sense now, it will make sense, I promise. Okay? All right, so we're done here. Let's close this up. All right, perfect. Now let's go to our model and create a few model classes here. Okay? So we know that the weather consists of clouds, current conditions, rain or snow, temperature, wind, and so forth, right? So we're going to model that to make sure that our code, again, is very organized and easy to use, intuitive, and hopefully efficient as well. So right-click on the model package. Say Java class. This first class we're going to create is called clouds. This clouds class will hold an instance of a cloud. What does cloud have? We can just say precipitation. So we send private int precipitation. Okay. Let's go ahead and say command N to create a few getters and setters. Well, in this case, it's just going to be one. That's fine. So we get precipitation, which returns an integer, and set precipitation, which takes in a precipitation int. And we're done for that one. Okay. Another one, we're going to call this place or location. In this case, we're going to go to place. So a place or a location has a latitude, a longitude. So what we can do, we can say private float long. That's for longitude. Private float lat for latitude. We'll model all of that to match this data here, as you can see. Private long sunset, private long sunrise, say private string country, because country is a string, private string city, private long last update. All right. Let's go ahead and say command N and create getters and setters. Let's select all, and they're okay. And without even think about it, everything is set up for us. All right. Let's save that and let's get out of here. Let's go ahead and create another class here for our models. So new Java, and this one's going to be called current condition. Of course, the current condition will have few instance variables as well. So private int weather ID, say private int condition, private, sorry, this condition should be string, change that, say private string description, say private string icon, private float pressure, private float humidity, private float max temp, private float mean temp for temperature, of course, and then we're gonna say private double temperature. Again, Command N. Let's go and do some getters and setters. Let's go ahead and select them all, say enter, and everything is created for us. Oh, how beautiful. Excellent. So we're done here for our current condition. Gonna go ahead and create another few more classes here. So new Java, the next one we're gonna call snow. The snow is the same thing as clouds, so it just has precipitation. So it's a private int precipitation. I'm gonna go Command N again and create setters and getters, and that's the only one, and we're done. Again, a new one. In this case, we're gonna go and call it temperature. So our temperature will have a temp, so private double temp, private float mean temp, private float max temp. Of course, let's go ahead, Command N again, getters and setters, select all and enter. All right, we're getting there. Okay, so let's go ahead and create another one. So new Java class. We're gonna call this one weather. Now the weather, as you can see, we'll have to use all of these other classes because the weather includes clouds, current condition, place, snow, and temperature, and everything, okay? So it's our hub class, if you will. Okay, now the weather, we're gonna go ahead and create a few instance variables, which most of them will actually be other classes. So in this case, it's gonna be place, so public string, we're gonna call icon data, and then we can say public current condition. It's gonna be current conditions is equal to new current condition. So we just instantiated this current condition class here object, and let's say public temperature. Okay, I'm gonna go temperature is equal to new temp temperature. Okay. Before we proceed here, we need to create another one here. So say model new. Let's say wind. So wind has speed, and also it has degree. So I'm gonna go Command N again, getters and setters, select all and enter, and there it is. So let's go back to our weather class and say, instantiate it, say public wind is equal to new wind, say public snow is equal to new snow, and say public clouds is equal to new clouds. Excellent. All right, so as you can see, the weather so we're putting everything in our weather here. So all of our classes we have created, we are instantiating or creating them here as instance variables, so that way we can just say weather dot current condition, and then we can get current condition. All right, as we proceed, you will see how all of this plays together nicely. Okay, now we're going to go into our data. So right click, say new Java class. Now this class is going to be called weather HTTP client. This is the heart of the application because this is where we are going to parse or get that JSON object, get this JSON object here from the web, from this API, and parse it, meaning read each line and get the information that we need. All of this is going to be happening here. So it's the heart of everything here, okay? And I'll explain everything what's happening here. We're going to create a method, so we're going to say public of type string called get weather data. And we're going to pass in string, we're going to call it place. Okay. Now inside here, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and create an HTTP URL connection. So we're going to start creating our connection between our application, our app, and the web, our API. So we're going to say HTTP URL connection, that one there. I'm going to call connection, and I'm going to set it to null. And I'm going to go ahead and get an input stream, because everything as we get from the web is going to be as an input stream, right? I'm going to call this input stream, and I'm going to say null, just setting things up. And here we're going to go ahead and say connection. We're going to say HTTP URL and say new URL, because we have to create an URL. And then we're going to just pass in, say, alt enter to import our URL. And inside here, that's where we're going to pass our base URL that we have created here in our utils. This base URL here, because that's the URL that's needed to go and fetch our data, our JSON, which coincidentally is this here. Okay, that's all we're doing here. So let's pass that in. Say utils dot base URL. Okay, and then we're gonna append the place, which we are getting from this parameter here, argument. Okay, and of course after that we're gonna say dot open connection, and we're gonna have some error if you just double click here, and we have this red bulb, and just say put surround try and catch. And why, you may ask? Well, it's because since we are connecting to the web, to the internet, sometimes some errors may occur, and there's no guarantee that things are going to work. So you always want to put in between try and catch. Okay, we'll proceed. Say connection, because this is our connection to the world, right? This object here now, because we're connecting to our base URL, which is the API, which contains all the JSON object. Okay, so now we can say connection dot set request method. What is the request method? Is a get, meaning we are asking, we are knocking at the door saying, hey, give me data. That's why we say get. Okay, and then we're going to say connection dot set do input, just put it true. I'm going to go ahead and say connection dot set do output, just put it true. Just setting things up here. And then finally, we're going to say connection dot connect. All right. Now let's go ahead and read the response that we are getting from our URL. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to say string buffer. And I'm going to call it string buffer. So just think of string buffer, a bucket that you're creating where you're going to put all of your data that you're getting from the internet. And going to say it's equal to new string buffer. So we are creating string buffer. So we're just creating that big bucket where we're going to put our strings, our data. Okay. Now we're going to say input stream. Remember, we instantiated here, we created over there, is equal, we get the connection dot get input stream. So now we're getting that input stream, the data that we're getting from the web, from our API here. And remember, everything comes in as an input stream, like a stream of bits, stream of data. At this point, whatever we're getting, it's nothing that you and I can read. It's just a stream of bits and data traveling to your device. Okay? All right. And now we're going to go and say buffered reader. I'm going to create buffer reader is equal to new buffer reader. Now we're going to pass in an object, an input stream object, an input stream reader object, and we're going to then pass in our input stream. The way you need to think about it is, okay, we create this buffer reader. this buffer reader is the only object that can actually read this input stream that we're getting from the web. Okay? Because then what we're saying here, input stream reader, and then we're passing in that input stream. So we're just saying, hey, buffer reader, just go ahead and hold everything into your bucket because you're the one who can read this. So just hold that stream and start reading everything, okay? So now this buffer reader has all of this data, the input stream, ready to be read. Let's go ahead and say string line is equal to null. Line is equal to buffer reader dot read line. So as the buffer reader goes through and start reading stuff, right? It's not null. Well, this is true. What we want to do, we want to take that bucket of string buffer that we created here and put all that information inside of it. So we said append. What we're going to append, we're going to just append the line. And as it appends, we want to break it so that everything is well organized line by line. So we're going to say back R, back N. Just think what we're saying here, as we put in our string buffer, our bucket with a lot of strings, we're just making sure that every time it reads one line, it goes to next, reads another one, goes to next, reads another one. It's just putting everything, organize everything in our bucket that we created here. Okay? As you can see, it's not that bad. It's not really hard once you start seeing the process. Okay? Perfect. And now here we can say input stream dot close because we are done. And then we can say connection dot disconnect because we're done. We need to disconnect. And then we're going to return our string buffer, our bucket of strings that we created here. And then we start putting strings into it here. And then we have to make sure that it's all string because we have to convert everything to string that we can use. All right. And of course here we just say return null. If none of this is true, there's nothing coming in, we're just going to return nothing. And there you have it. We have created the heart of this application, which goes out and gets that information we need and parts everything out, makes it into a text, and returns that object that we can then use to fetch the temperature, the wind, the sunshine, all the data here. All right. Excellent. All right, so in the next video, we will continue working on this, but now we are set up to start making really good progress, start fetching and showing all this information in our app. All right, so I'll see you in the next video. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so in the previous video, we were able to create the weather HTTP client class, which essentially goes and fetches our data and returns to us as a string. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and create another class. We'll take that data and create a JSON object. We'll take that data and create a JSON object, which will then be able to extract all that information. In other words, which will then able to parse that information. Okay, so let's go to our data, package, right click, say new, Java class, and we're going to call this JSON weather parser. So, okay. At the top here, the first thing we're going to do, we are going to create a static method. So say public static weather. So say alt enter to import our weather class, and it's going to be called get weather. And we're going to pass in a string called data, which is going to be the string that we're getting from here, this string here. Okay, excellent. All right, so let's finalize this. Now here we're going to create, put a note here, create JSON object from data. To create a JSON object is very simple. All you do, just say JSON. You can see there's the JSON object, and we're going to call this JSON object is equal to new JSON object, and you can pass in our data that we're getting, which is a string. Telling us we have issues, just click there and say surround, try, and catch, and that's all fine. And here at the top, let's go ahead and say weather. Let's create an instance of our weather object. I'm gonna call it weather is equal to new weather. If you remember correctly, let's go back to our weather here. There's our weather object. As you can see, this weather class is a hub class which has all of these other classes instantiated here. So that's what we are instantiating here. Perfect. Now inside here, our try, now that we have our JSON, because our JSON object now has all of the data that we got from the web. Now the first thing we're going to do, we're going to say place, because we want to create a place object. So Alt Enter to import the place. I'm going to call place is equal to new place, because we want to start putting things into this place object here. Okay, so we're going to say JSON object. We're going to go ahead and create and get the coordinates. So coord obj is equal to utils dot get object, and let's pass in our tag name, which is the coord, and the data that we are parsing is going to be what? It's going to be our JSON object. Now let's explain what's happening here. So we're creating a JSON object. We are calling it coord object. What this coord object is going to do, it's going to hold our coordinates data here. You can see this is what we are doing. We just taking this, parsing this information here. All right. So what we're doing, we're calling then utils that get object. Remember that utils that I told you class that has everything we need. So we are calling this get object, which takes in the tag name. In this case, let's go back here. Our tag name is the coord. So coord, C-O-O-R-D, our tag name to this object here. So it takes the tag name and takes the object that we want to parse. So in this case, what we're saying here, we're saying, okay, get the object. So the tag name is coord, and the object, the JSON, is the JSON object we are talking about, we're parsing. Well, we got it. It's this one here. Does it make sense? Do you see how things are working now, right? All right, so now this coord object has our coordinates, which are, I'm going to go back here again, this two, long and lat. Okay, getting the hang of it? Okay, so now what we can do, since we have our coordinates, what do? We just say place dot set latitude. So lat. Notice it takes a float, so we can now say, because our coordinate here has our lat and long, we can just say coord object get float, and we're going to say lat for our tag name, and we are going to say what object, what JSON object we are querying, we are extracting from our coord object. Now notice we have a problem here. It looks like I didn't create this get float. Let's go back to our utils here. I do have public static float. Why isn't this? It should work. Oh, I'm sorry. Ha, of course not. It's not coord. It should be utils. Okay, so there we go. Utils that get float, lat, and we are passing in the object coord object, because that's the object that has all these coordinates. Okay, so we do the same thing, say place, that's set longitude, say long, say utils, that get float again, when pass in long, right? To make sure, let's go back to our JSON here to make sure. Okay, see, so we are querying long, which is longitude, and we got the latitude, LAT, and now we're getting the long, which is for longitude. All right, so we pass in again our coord object. Let's go ahead now and get the sys object, which again is this one here. Let me show you again. Now we're here, so we're gonna go and get all of this. Same concept. So what I do, first of all, we say JSON object again. We say JSON object. Now this is going to be sys object is equal to utils dot get object. And what's the tag name? We looked, it's sys. Let's go back here, make sure. Right? That's the tag name of this object we're getting, sys. So it's sys, there it is. And which object are we querying? Well, it's the main object, which in this case, JSON object. Where is this from? Well, remember, this is our JSON object here. That's what we're putting here. We're not putting the chord because that's the chord object only has lat and long. Now we're going back to the main tree, to the parent here. We're saying go ahead back to here and query until you find the sys, right? Because this here is the main object, the tree. And first we went and got the chord. And then we went inside this chord object, we got long and latitude, and we get out of that. And now we went back to our main object, JSON, and we said we want to query sys object. Now we're getting the sys, right? And if we wanted to go and get weather, we could do the same thing. Okay? That's what's happening here. So now the object is JSON object. Okay? Now that we have our sys object, we can do the same. So we can say place dot set country, right? So we can say sys. Now we can say utils again dot get string. Now you can see how handy this util method is, right? Because all we're doing, we're just calling these utils that get string, which are all of these helper methods we created here that return what we need. Okay? So we pass in here, what we're going to pass in here, we're going to say country. And what object? Well, it's going to be the sys object because that's where everything we need is located. Say place again, dot set last update. We say utils, dot get int. We say dt. Now for the tag, we're going to say dt. And the object, here's a very interesting thing. We're not going to put object sys, and I'll show you why. We're going to say JSON object. Now the reason why we're going back to the parent object, which is this one here, instead of saying the sys object, which we created here, is because the dt is actually outside of our sys object. Let's go back here and take a look. Well, let's find dt. dt is right here. And you notice this dt, it's not inside of this bracket here. It's not inside of these braces, not this. It's inside of this main braces here, which means the main object, the parent object. Okay, so if you want to access anything that's outside, you can say dt, id, name, and cod. These are all outside of any of these braces you can see inside here. So naturally, to access those, I have to go back to my main JSON, which is here, right? And then access that way. Okay? It may sound very confusing now, but if you think of it that way, then it's much easier to understand. So that's why we're saying JSON object as opposed to say sys. All right? Okay, I did that on purpose because I just wanted to show you. All right, now let's proceed to say place dot set sunrise, right? And say utils dot get int, and the tag is going to be sunrise, and of course the object is going to be sys object. Let's make sure again. All right, we want sunrise. Let's see where sunrise. All right, there it is. So sunrise is indeed inside of our sys object here. So we're good. So is the country, so is the message, which we don't care about, and the sunset. Yeah? Okay, let's do the same. Let's say place dot set sunrise, sunset, I'm sorry. It's going to be utils dot get int, and it's going to be sunset and sys object. All right, let's keep going. Now let's go ahead and say place dot set city. It's going to be utils dot get string, because it's going to be a string, and its name. And again, we're going to go back to JSON object. Oh, I'm sorry. JSON object. Why? Because if we look at name, let's go find name and see where that may be. Ah, there it is. So name is way off. It's at the same level as the DT, which we just parsed. And here then, we're going to say weather object, which we created here, instantiated, dot place is equal to place. So we're just setting our place from weather. So that place here, we're setting it to the place which we have put everything, all this information into. All right. Now let's go ahead and get the weather here. The weather object. Now the weather here, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather again. And frankly, this is exactly what I do professionally every day when I'm dealing with, when I'm working with APIs. You kind of have to go back and forth and make sure that you're getting the right data, right? Now, there's a very interesting thing here. As we know, the big JSON object starts here, and then we have this child object coordinates, then we have the system, they have the weather. As if you look closely, you notice that the weather is actually an array because it doesn't have the squiggly brackets. It starts with the square brackets, which means it's an array. But inside of this array, then we have an object here. Okay, so now we have to treat this differently than we were treating the sys, the chord, the main, and the wind, and the clouds, right? Because this is a JSON array, not a JSON object. Why? How do we know that? Because you see here, it starts here with a square bracket as opposed to this squiggly, these braces here. Okay? And so the way we treat that is we just say JSON array. All right? Then we say JSON array is equal to JSON object, right? It's going to be equal to JSON object. So we say JSON array is equal to JSON object, right? Because that's the parent here, that's the whole object. And then we say dot get JSON array, and we pass in the tag name, which in this case is weather. Right? So let's go back here and make sure we're not mistaken here. Okay, there it is. So it's weather. Okay. Now we know we have this JSON array here that we can work with. By now you know that arrays have indexes, right? Now if you look here, this array only has one item in it, right? Which is this whole object here that starts here. And you can see if you click, you close, that's our index 1 or 0. So in that case then, to access all of this, since it's just one, what do? We can just then say JSON object, what's inside is actually an object, because again we have braces surrounding it. So now we go ahead and say JSON object again, and we're going to go JSON weather. Now we get our JSON array, right? Because that's what's holding our object. Dot get JSON object at what index? Let's just put 0 because we are just interested in that first item. Now this JSON weather object here is what we have here. We're saying we got all of this inside here, all this object here, which is inside of this array of size 1. I don't mean to confuse you, but I just want to make sure that you understand where we're coming from here. It's very important. All right, so now we have that. We can then say now weather dot current condition dot set weather ID. We can go ahead and say utils dot get int, and we pass in our ID. And what object are we getting this from? Well, our JSON weather. All right, so I'll go back again here. I know this may be annoying, but it's important. So now we went ahead and got the ID. Let's go ahead and do the same for all others. So now we're going to say weather dot current condition dot set description. It's going to be utils dot get string, and we're going to say description, and we're going to get from JSON weather. There it is. Weather dot current condition dot set condition. I'm going to say utils dot get string again, and we're going to say main and JSON weather. That's where we're getting this from. And finally, we're going to say weather dot current condition dot set icon, right? And we're going to say utils dot get string, and it's icon and JSON weather object. Excuse me. So we got description, main, icon, and ID, which is exactly what we have inside. ID, main, description, icon. All right. We're going to do the same. We're going to go ahead and get the wind. So we can then say JSON object, wind object is equal to utils dot get object. So we pass in our tag name, it's going to be wind, and the object is going to be JSON object. It's our parent object, this one here. Let's go ahead and check and make sure we're actually doing it right. We want wind. Where's the wind? And there it is. Yep. So you can see it's its own object. Again, it's not an array because we have braces here. So the wind has speed and degree. So let's get those. All right. So now we can say, so weather dot wind dot set speed, then say utils dot get float, and the tag is speed, and of course the object is going to be wind object, which is this one here. I'm going to do the same. So weather dot wind dot set degree, so utils dot get float, and of course it's going to be deg for degrees, and again wind object. And let's go ahead and set up clouds. The JSON object, we're going to call clouds cloud object. It's equal to utils, again the get object, pass in, it's going to be clouds, and we're going to get this from our JSON object. Let's, again, just to make sure, because we're good programmers, to make sure that we are doing it right. Let's go back and make sure. So we want the clouds. Where is the clouds? Oh, there it is. So, okay. So it belongs to the main object. So it says all there. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and say here, weather dot clouds dot set precipitation. We say then utils dot get int, and we say all, and from where? From our cloud object. And once we're done, we have to return our weather, because our weather now has everything. If you look back here, there's our weather. That's our hub. Now, in case things don't go wrong, let's go ahead and say return null. You've done it. This is our get weather, which takes our data that we got from our weather HTTP client. The main takeaways here, let's recap a little bit. So our weather HTTP client, what it does, it connects to our API link, right? Base URL, and gets all the information and creates this bucket called buffer of strings, where then it loops through and reads everything in and organizes everything in lines, right? And spits out all of it as a string. And then we catch the string buffer.toString here, we catch it and we pass it through the get weather, see, as a string data here, and we create objects, JSON objects, and we start parsing, and then we take our place, and then we update, and then of course in the process we start setting things up with our objects that we have created here, our models. That way we can just use that information in our application. Very good. I know that you may think, oh, there's a lot of work involved into getting JSON and creating all these things. It's true, but if you think about it as a process that, if you understand what's happening here, which is my goal, to make you to help you understand the process, not necessarily why this is like this, why that does this, no, but the process that we're taking here, that's the most important thing, right? Because this code, you can have it and look at it and play with it and reuse it many times, but it's the process that is real important, that you understand how things are working, and that's very, very important. Okay, all right, so in the next video we're gonna go ahead and then fetch all of this and put in our main activity right here, and then show everything that we got from our API so that users can actually see in the app. All right, so I'll see you in the next video. All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to go ahead and tie everything together. So we're going to go to our main activity and start setting things up. The first thing we're going to do, of course, is create a few instance variables here. So private text view, and of course, it's going to be city name. So private text view again. I'm going to say temp. For temperature, say private image view. It's going to be icon view. Okay. Private text view. For now, it's going to be description. So private text view, humidity, private text view, pressure, private text view, wind, private text view, sunrise, private text view, sunset, private text view, updated. All right, that should be it. Now we're going to go ahead and fetch all of these views here, text views. All right, so we're going to go ahead and say, start with the first one here, text city name. So we say city name. Okay, it's a text view. Say find view by ID r.id .city text. All right, we're gonna go ahead and say icon view. It's an image view, so cast it. So find view r.id .thumbnail icon. So temp text view, find view by ID r.id temp text, description, the text view, r.id, that cloud text, humidity, is equal to text view, find view r.id dot humidity text, pressure text view. All right, a lot of setting up here. You're probably used to it now. ID dot pressure text. Perfect. All right, we're getting there. Wind. Find view by ID. r.id dot wind text, sunrise, text view, find view, rise text, sunset, text view, id dot set text. Okay, am I missing anything? Humidity, wind, and of course I'm missing update, text view, find r.id, update text. All right, now let's go ahead here and create a method. So it's going to be public void render weather data. Okay, and this one's going to take a string, city name of city. Okay, and inside here, that's where we're going to call methods that go and get fetch all of this information. Okay, one important point about getting data from the web and parsing it and parse it is that when we do all these things, when we connect to the web and hopefully retrieve something from them, and we parse from there, and we parse, and we do all of this stuff, it's very important to remember that those transactions of going back and forth through the web and get stuff and parsing it, it takes time. So with that, we don't want to put that much stress in our application, right? So we want to make sure whenever we do these transactions, we want to do all of these tasks in a background. Because the one thing we don't want to happen is, as users use our applications, they start noticing our application UI is very slow. That's not good. So with that in mind, Android has a few classes that help us take all of those heavy tasks and do all of that in the background. So we're going to use this class called async task. So the first thing we're going to say this is going to be obviously an inner class. So we're going to say private class, and we're going to name this weather task because it's a task. So it extends async task. And we're going to pass in a string parameter and a void, and we're going to pass a weather class because that's what we're going to be populating as we do this. And you notice right away something is wrong. That means we have to implement abstract methods here. So what do we do now? We just go Command N and go to override method. And there's a few methods we can override, but the most interesting ones are the do in background. So select that, and the on post execute. All right, so click OK, and there you have it. So you see this do in background, as the name implies. That means everything that happens inside here, it's going to be in a background away from the main thread of your application, therefore making your application still responsive as things are being downloaded from the web. All right, so, and on post execute, this is where you want to then populate all of the data that you got on do in background. This is where you populate the data so that you can show to the user here on post execute. All right. So naturally here inside of our do in background, we're going to say string, right? Data is equal to, now we're going to go and call our weather. That's where we're going to go ahead and instantiate our weather HTTP client we created earlier and access its one important method, which is the get weather data. Okay, so now things are coming together. So the way we do is we're going to go ahead and say new weather HTTP client. All right, and then we say dot get weather data, and we pass in our parameters. So params, and it's an array. We're going to take the first parameter that we find inside. Again, what we're doing here, we're saying we are instantiating our weather client, our weather HTTP client, and we are calling the get weather data. And we know that the get weather data, as you see here, it takes in a string. So naturally, we are passing the string that we're getting from our parameters here. Perfect. Now that we have everything in the data here, so this data variable holds everything that we got from here. So it holds our string buffer to string here, which is our data. Let's go up here and say weather. Let's instantiate our weather object. It's equal new weather so that we can use it everywhere. Now we can say weather is equal to JSON weather parser, because now we're going to go ahead and get our parser because we have the data now. So we need to parse it, right? Which is all done here. So we call that and say we're going to call the get weather, and we pass in the data. And now all we have to do is just say return weather. And here you can see the power of object-oriented programming, right? Because just look how little effort we had to put in order to get our data here. Organized our project in such a way we have objects that interact with one another and make everything cleaner and more intuitive. So we're gonna say log.v and say data so that we know. And we're gonna go ahead and say weather dot current, so that place that gets city. Let's see if this is gonna work. So here we're gonna go ahead and say weather task is equal to new weather task. So essentially we're instantiating this here, okay? And then we're gonna say weather task dot execute, and then we're gonna pass in say new string. It's gonna be an array of strings, and then we're gonna just pass in, we're gonna go and say city because that's what we're getting from here, and we're gonna append this unit here. So put it and units is equal to metric. This will allow us to get metric unit as we get information from the web, okay? All right, so now if we then call this in here and pass in, let's say string, let's say Spokane, US, because we're calling this render weather here, and we're passing in a city, which is gonna be in here, okay? So let's go ahead and give it a run and see if this works. And of course we should get data and we should get the city that we passed here, which is going to be Spokane. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that and run. All right, and you can see our application is running. Okay, we won't see anything here, but if we look at here, let me make this a little bit bigger. If you look at here at the bottom here, say Spokane, which is this Spokane here. Now, let's change this, see if we can get some other value so that we are indeed sure that we're getting the value from the web. Okay, let's say then weather dot, let's say current condition dot get humidity, or let's say get description. Okay, so we should get a description, whether it's cloudy or nice out. Okay, let's run again. All right, it's running. And why do you have it? See here? It says here, let me make sure I just say data. All right, see here? It says sky is clear. So clearly we are getting data from the web. That's amazing. All right, good. We are in business. Perfect. So now that we have that data, that means we can now go to our own post execute and start populating everything, right? The first thing we can do, we can say, so here what we can do now, we can go ahead and say city name, right? That set text. You can say weather, because remember we are getting the weather from here, right? Which is the same weather that we are getting here. Okay, So we can say weather dot place dot get city, and then we're going to have a little space and comma, and then append and say weather dot place dot get country. Okay, we can then go ahead and say temp dot set text, and we can say, for instance, weather dot current condition dot get temperature, right? And say plus and put C for now. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. At this point, we should have at least here say Spokane. In fact, let's change that so that we don't get confused. Let's put another city. Let's say Moscow, and that's in Russia, so RU. Okay, so now if we run, we should get something in our app. Okay, so run. All right, there it is. Let's go ahead. The other thing I need to tell you about this API is that it's not very reliable. So sometimes the connections may not be as we expect, so you may get errors. But what I usually do, just keep running it. And I know it's not very ideal, since I'm just showing you how to parse things and how to external API. It's gonna do it. Okay. All right. So you can go ahead here, and you look. What do you have? It says Moscow, Russia, 0.0 Celsius. Great. Let's go ahead again and change here. Another place. Let's put, let's say Seattle, which is in the US. Let's save. We should see Seattle, and it will tell us what's the weather like in Seattle. So run. Okay, it still hasn't. Okay, there it is. And there you have it, Seattle, United States of America. And of course we have issues because it's saying 00C. So we will have to fix that. That's no problem. But at least you can see that now we have an app that is working in the sense that we are fetching data. And okay, let's go ahead then and start fetching other information here. So the next thing we're going to do, let's go and get humidity. Say humidity dot set text and say humidity. Okay, and now we can say weather dot condition, current condition I mean, that get humidity. There it is. And of course we're gonna humidity, we have to put percentage because that's the unit. So plus percentage, there it is. We're gonna go get pressure dot set text. I'm gonna say pressure. So weather dot current conditions dot get pressure, and the unit for that is gonna be HPA. And we're gonna keep going. Let's say then wind. And so we're gonna go ahead and say wind dot set text. Say wind. And we're gonna say weather. Okay, dot current condition dot get wind. Well, we're gonna get speed, of course. In fact, is weather. So we say weather dot wind, right? And then we're gonna go and get speed. Okay, and the unit's gonna be meters per second. And now let's go ahead and get sunrise. That's set text. You can say sunrise. Then we can say weather dot place dot get sunrise. Okay, then sunset dot set text, sunset. You can say weather dot place dot get sunset. All right, so let's keep going. Let's go ahead and get the last updated. So we go ahead and say updated. All right, dot set text, and we're gonna say last updated. So weather that place that get last updated. Excellent. And let's say description that set text, and we're gonna say condition space, and we're gonna append weather that current condition get condition, and of course we're gonna go ahead and organize this to look good. So we're gonna append the weather that current condition that get description. There it is, and we're gonna close the parentheses. All right, so let's save this. Let's test and see what we see. So it's running, right? As you can see, things are working perfectly, although some of these numbers are in a different time stamp, so I'd have to change this. Okay, things are working, and we keep getting 0, 0 here. Okay, so let's go ahead and change these numbers. So the first thing we're gonna do for this to work, we're gonna go ahead back to our main activity, and before anything here, we're gonna say create a date format class. So date format, we're gonna say df is equal to date format time instance, and now we're gonna say string. It's gonna be our sunrise date is equal to date format dot format, and we're gonna pass in a new object, so new date object here, and we pass in our weather dot place that get sunrise. Of course, Alt enter to get our date, so make sure you get you tilde that date there, so enter. Perfect. Now that we have this string here all formatted, we can copy that and go to our sunrise, which is here, and get rid of all of this and just copy paste our sunrise string here. Okay, let's do the same. Say string sunset date, so df that format, passing new date, say weather that place that get sunset. Perfect. Let's copy this and paste here in our sunset. All right, let's go ahead and do the same for others. Now let's go ahead and create, so okay, string update date is equal to df that format new date weather that place that get last update. Of course, again, copy this and we're gonna change it here. There it is. Perfect. We're getting there. And now we're gonna go ahead and say decimal format, because we want to make sure we have decimal format. Say decimal format is equal to new decimal format, and then we're gonna pass in pound dot pound, which means we just want to, which means if we have a, say, a double or float, we want to round it to 1 decimal point. Okay. And now we can say string. We can say temperature format is equal to decimal format dot format, and we pass in our weather dot current condition dot get temperature. All right. And once we have that, of course, we can just copy this and go to our weather here and just paste that. All right, let's save this and run. And there you have it. Last update 12/10/58. This looks like it's really big here. Let's change the font size here. So let's go back to our activity here. This last here, it says 26. Let's say 14 and save. All right. Now in our Celsius here, we want to put a degree. We want it to say degree symbol here, right? Which is that little small O. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. What I do, I'm just going to copy it from a different source. And I'm going to paste it here. All right. And we're having issues here with this. Okay. All right, so let's go back to our JSON weather parser, make sure everything is correct there. So right about here, let's go ahead and say JSON object main object is equal to utils dot get object. We're going to pass in main, and we then going to say JSON object. So what are we going to do, what are we doing here is trying to fetch this main object here with all these items here, okay? And let's go ahead and say here then, we can say weather that current condition that set humidity. We can say utils that get int and pass in our humidity. All right, and of course the object is going to be our main object. So we got our humidity there. So let's say weather dot current condition dot set pressure utils dot get int. Let's go to pressure. And main object again. So weather dot current condition dot set mean temperature. So utils dot get float. It's gonna be temp underscore min and main object. Again, weather dot current condition that set max temp utils that get float temp max main object, then weather that current condition again that set temperature. We can see utils that get double and pass in our temp along with our main object. So let's test this out and see. And there you have it. So 23.6 Celsius in Sao Paulo. Let's play and let's go ahead and change this here to say Russia, maybe Moscow. RU. Let's save and run again. And there it is, Moscow, Russia 4.3, and the wind, and we have condition, sky is clear, and everything is working as expected. Very awesome, wonderful. So as you can see, our application is coming together very nicely. The next thing we need to do is to fetch our icon here and be able to change the city. All right, so I'll see you in the next video where we will make those changes to finalize our application. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. All right, welcome back. So in this video, I'll show you how to get an icon here, which will represent the weather condition. So if it's sunny, it's going to be an image of sunshine. If it's cloudy, it will show cloudy. If it's raining, it's going to show an image of rain. Now what are we going to do? We're going to go back to our main activity. We'll go ahead and create another async task. So right about here, we're going to go ahead and say private class download image async task. And of course, this is going to extend the async task class. And we're going to pass in a string, a void, and a bitmap. It's a bitmap because we are getting an image. And of course, bitmap, we have to import that. So Alt Enter. And now you'll notice that we have a problem. It has to implement some abstract methods. So we say Command N, and let's go to override methods. And the ones we're interested in is the do in background and on post execute. Say OK, and there we have it. Perfect. Still inside of our download image async task class, we're going to create a private method, which is a bitmap, because it will return an image, a bitmap. We can say download image. We're going to pass in a string. We're going to call it code. Let's first initialize our HTTP client object. So we're going to call final default HTTP client. We're going to call it client. It's equal to new default HTTP client. All right, now let's go ahead and let's put another final here. Let's say HTTP get object here, get request, we're gonna call it, is equal to new HTTP get, and we're gonna pass in our link, our URL. So it's gonna be utils dot icon URL. And we're gonna append our code that we are passing here. And then, of course, we need to append the .png. All right, so let's go back and explain a little bit what's going on here. What is this URL? Let's go back to our utils here. So the icon URL here, as you can see, it will take in a code, which could be something like this 20d.png. So this 20d, it's going to be the code that we're talking about here, that we're going to be passing in. So this code is going to be here, which essentially will complete our URL like this, and we're adding the PNG. Okay? Now let's go back, save this. Let's go to our API, so take a closer look. So what we're going to be fetching is this icon code here. And we're going to get this icon code. Once we got it, we are going then to pass it inside of our icon URL and then fetch that image. All right, excellent. So let's keep going here. HTTP response, I'm gonna call it response, is equal to client dot execute, and we're gonna pass our get request because that's where our URL is. And of course we have a problem, so click and go here, surround with try and catch. All right, now we're gonna check for a success response. So every HTTP request that we send out, we usually receive a number, and this number that we receive from the server usually means two things. One, things went well. The other one, things didn't go well, right? So we're gonna fetch that response we get and to see whether or not this request was accepted or not accepted. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna say final int, we're gonna call status code, all right? So it's gonna be equal to response dot get status line dot get status code. So now we can then say if status code is not equal to HTTP status, right? We want to see the status of our request .sc okay. So if things are not okay, then we know we have a problem. So we're gonna just log an error, and we're gonna say download image. I'm gonna say error, and then we're gonna just append the status code. And this is just for us developers, okay? And then of course we're gonna return, and then we're gonna return null because something went wrong, so we will stop there. Okay? Okay, let's get out of that if statement. Now we can say final HTTP entity. I'm gonna call this entity is equal to response dot get entity. Now we're gonna check again, so we're gonna say if entity is not null, all right, because we want to make sure that we actually have something. If that's the case, then we are good. So that means we're gonna go ahead and say input stream. We're gonna call this input stream. We're gonna set it to null, and then we're gonna say input stream is equal to entity dot get content. Now we're getting the content that we, okay? Now we're gonna go ahead and decode contents, what we just got from the stream. How do we do that? We are gonna say final bitmap. Called bitmap is equal to, we're gonna call this class bitmap factory dot decode stream, and we're gonna pass our input stream. So essentially it's just reading our input stream and making it a bitmap, an image. And once that is done, we can just return our bitmap. And of course here in the end, we're gonna say return null. Okay, so that's good. Now that we have this download image method, now we can then set it up in our do in background and on post execute. Now in our do in background, what we're gonna do, we're just gonna return, we're gonna say download, so calling this method here that we just created, and we're gonna pass in params and get the first parameter that we're passing in as a string. And then in on post execute, so after things have been downloaded from the web, we can then gonna say icon view, which is an image view, if you remember correctly here. So we're fetching this icon view here, and we say dot set image bitmap, and what do? We pass our bitmap because it's been passed from here. And we'll go ahead and get rid of this. We don't need that super. And now we're ready to call this download image async task here. So copy these. If we go back to our weather, so we want to call this here. And remember, we need to fetch that icon data icon. So we're gonna say new download image async task dot execute. And what we pass weather dot icon data. This weather.icon data we need to set here. So what we can do now, we can go ahead and say weather.icon data is equal to, so we need to go and fetch it. We're going to say weather.current condition.get icon. So all we're doing here, we're getting that icon code. We're getting this code here, icon code, in this case O2D. And we put in our weather.icon, and then we're passing here. So that if you go back here, as you can see, this download would take that string, and that string is going to be that icon, which will be passed on here and do all the work to get that image. And of course, we'll return our bitmap. So let's go ahead and give it a try and see. So save this and run. All right, it's running, but we don't see our icon. Let's go make sure that we are actually icon that set bitmap. So you will get some issues with this API, as I mentioned earlier, especially when it comes to downloading images. If you get this error here that says ASCII image decoder factory returned null, okay, and you most likely will get this error, and that's fine because again this API is very, very unstable, and I apologize for that. What you need to do is put this image instead here, as you can see here. So I'll share with you this code, of course, this project, so you'll have all of this. And instead, you use this second one, which has a URL to an image, right? So we're going to use that one. And if you notice, if you run this, we will see an image showing. And there you have it. As you can see, we are able to download the image, an image here, which tells us that things are working properly. The class that we created to download image is working. The problem is with the API again. So I suggest you just use this URL here as opposed to the API URL. Although in your case, it may be that you tried and it worked, but in case it doesn't work, and I apologize again for that, it's a free API, so there's a lot of problems with it. And you may also get a lot of timed out issues, meaning that you will try to reach the server and things won't work. And so in that case, again, don't worry, just keep trying and at some point it will work. Okay. All right, so we have our image. So now we're going to work on change city. So the idea here is when you click change city, an alert dialog will pop up, and then you'll be able to enter the city that you want. The first thing we're going to do is we will create a new class. So we go to data here, right click, new Java class, and we're going to call this city preferences, or preference rather. Say okay. And of course, inside here, this is going to be, we're going to use shared preferences. So we're going to say shared preferences. We're going to call prefs for short. And we're going to have a public city preference. So this is our constructor. And we're going to pass in activity. And of course, we say alt enter to import our activity. Perfect. And inside here, we're going to say prefs is equal to activity dot get preferences. And of course, we pass in our activity here. So we say activity, and we get the mode private. Perfect. Now, if the user has not chosen a city, we just return default. So we're going to say here public string get city. And all we need to do here, we can return our prefs that get string, and of course the key is going to be city, and we're going to put, for me here, I'm just going to say Spokane as our default US. Okay, and we say public void set city. As the name implies, here we're going to be setting the city in case we don't have any set. So we say prefs that edit. Of course, we need to have that edit because we are going to commit here. So we're going to say put string, the key city, and city will be our value. As you can see here, we're passing our value in our method here. And don't forget to commit it. Otherwise, things won't work. Excellent. Let's save this and close out of it. Now, our render weather data here, as you can see, we are passing our Seattle, USA. Of course, we don't want that. What we want to be able to pass what we get from our shared preference. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to instantiate that class. So city shared preferences there. So we're going to say city preference is equal to new city preference, and we have to pass in a context, in this case main activity.this. Okay, we could have said get application context, but it's okay, we can just use the main activity.this. And then now that we have our city preference here object, we can then reference it by getting the city. So we can now say city preference dot get city. All right, let's go back here. So what we're doing here, we are calling this get city here. All right. And so here our render weather data takes in a city, a string, as you can see, and then we're passing in the city, and we are appending these units equals metric so that we get everything in metric, and then we proceed. Now the other thing we have to do now is to make sure that our change city here, right, when you click, we want to open up an alert dialog. So to do that, we're going to have to create another method. So at the bottom here we're going to go ahead and say private void show input dialog. Okay. And we're going to create our alert dialog. So alert dialog dot builder called builder is equal to new alert dialog dot builder, and we pass in our main activity as the context. All right. And now we're going to set the title. So builder dot set title. We're going to call, say, change city. We're going to make a final edit text here. I'm going to call this city input. And of course, we're going to say option enter to import our edit text. I'm going to say new edit text. And we pass in, of course, our context, main activity that this. Now we're going to say city input. That's set input type. We're going to say input type dot type class text. So here we're setting our city input, our edit text, to accept text. Okay. And while we're here, let's say city input dot set hint, because I want to make sure that there's a hint text there so people know what to enter. We're going to say Portland, US. Okay. And I can say builder. That's set view, because we need to set this view. So we're going to put in our CT input. So builder. That's set positive button. It's going to say submit. And we're going to say new dialog interface. All right, because we're attaching an event listener. So when they click, something needs to happen. In this case, what we're going to be doing is we are going to say city preference. So our class here, instantiation, is equal to new city preference. Of course, we need to pass in main activity again as our context at this. Excellent. Now city preference, our object just created, we can say then dot set city, and then we're gonna go and say city input dot get text, right? And then we have to convert that to string because that's what we need, we want. And now we're gonna create a string here. It's gonna go new city is equal to city preference, right? And then we're getting the city that we want, and we're putting in a string so that we can then use it. And once that is done, what are we going to do? We're going to call our render method, our render weather data, and we pass in this new city. All right, very simple here. And do not forget to actually show the builder. So builder.show, otherwise things are not going to work. Now we need to go here into our options item selected. Instead of saying return true, now we're going to go ahead and call our show input dialog and save, give it a run and see. All right, here we are. So let's give it a test, change. Oh, there it is. Beautiful. Now let's change the city here. Let's say Seattle, US, and say submit. And there you have it. It says Seattle and changed everything. It's 8.1 degrees Celsius, and we have humidity, we have sunrise, and everything is working. While we're here, let's go ahead and change one thing here. Maybe this time it will work. Let's go ahead and fetch the actual image from the server. Let's see. Again, this is hit and miss because sometimes works and some other times it doesn't work. We're gonna try. This is what we get from choosing a free API that's very unstable. All right, it's running. Okay, the image is not working again. You see here it says factory returned null. So, but in any case, we still have Seattle there. Let's change to something else. Let's say Moscow, Russia. Let's say there. And there you have it. Moscow, Russia right now is 3.8 degrees Celsius. And we can go ahead and change again. Let's say Sao Paulo. Let's say Lisbon. And it's PT, Portugal. See? There it is, Lisbon PT, 17.3. Let's change this to Maputo, Mozambique, MZ. That's where I'm from. And there you have it. Beautiful, 28.9 degrees Celsius. Very, very nice. So in this video, we were able to create a full functioning app that interacts with the web, gets the JSON. We are able to parse that JSON and display the data in our application. Even though we've been having some issues with the icon, that's mainly because, again, I apologize, the API that I chose to demonstrate this is very, very unstable. And so you will have a lot of issues. And again, I apologize deeply for that. But the main idea here is that you now understand how to fetch data, connect to the web and through via API and get information and then populate that information in your applications. Okay? That's the main point that I'm trying to get across. Okay, now let's go back here and make a few changes here. I don't like the way the weather app looks. Let's change this to a better title. So what do? We go to our manifest here, the weather app here, of course the app name. Let's go to our strings here, and for the app name, let's just say weather. That way it looks a little bit professional. So let's run again. All right, and also notice that it remembers your last city that you entered, right? So let's change this to something. Let's say this is where beta MZ. Let's say enter, and we have an error. This happens all the time. Let's run again. Let's see here, over here. Let's change this back to this image there. All right, let's run this one more time. All right, so here we go. Perfect. So 25.6 in Beira, Mozambique. Very, very nice. All right, so now we have a functioning application here. So congratulations for sticking around, and go ahead and play around with this app, change things, and go back and forth, change this link here. All right, so if by any chance the main link works, that's great. If not, don't worry, just use this one here. Congratulations and thank you again for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.